Content warning. This episode contains discussions of death, self-harm, and suicide. If at any time you feel you need emotional support, in the U.S. and in Canada, contact 988. Otherwise, contact your local crisis resource center. Listener discretion is advised. It was 4 a.m. in North Adams, the kind of pre-dawn stillness that feels heavy, like the air itself is holding its breath. James Hines had spent the entire night in the stables, sitting in the shadows with his friend, John Witters. They stood outside the barn, the glowing cherries of their cigarettes, the only light in the dark. John seemed to be doing better, and the fog of the previous day's accident, that horrific crash of the Pierce Arrow, seemed to be lifting. James finally allowed himself to breathe, and he thought that the worst was over. It was then that John turned to him. His voice was calm, and it was steady. "I'm gonna go tend to the horses," he said. James watched him turn back and walk into the darkness of the barn, and he waited and finished his cigarette. And he just sat back and listened to the silence. It was just a small sound, a pop in the night. But James knew. He ran towards the barn, calling for help, but as he crossed the threshold, he realized he was already too late.
Welcome to Crypt Walkers, the podcast where the eerie and enigmatic come to life. Hosted by Ryder, a police officer and paranormal investigator with a lens for the unexplained. Open the crypt. Come take a walk with us.
Hey guys, and welcome back to another case episode of Crypt Walkers. My name is Ryder, and thank you for joining me as I open the crypt and take a walk into the shadows of the unexplained. Before we begin, I should warn you, I am recording with a heavy thunderstorm going on just outside, so you may hear some thunder in the background. It's a great atmosphere for doing paranormal case exploration, quite literally, but if it's so boring that it's completely destroying the audio, I'm going to have to cut it out. Otherwise, I'll just leave it in. I know I've been away for a little while, but I appreciate you sticking with me during the silence. Moving forward, Crypt Walkers is shifting to a one-host show. Though I'll be bringing in the occasional guest to help me navigate these dark corners, William just simply won't be here. William is killing it with WTCW Paranormal, and obviously when the fire's hot, he's got to dedicate all his attention to keep it going. And I'm very happy for him. Just because we may not hear from him in every episode doesn't mean that he won't be a guest co-host in the future or that he isn't a part of the Crypt Walkers family. Since I am now a one-man band or show, so to speak, to make sure that I am bringing you the highest quality research and production, you can expect a new journey into the crypt at least every first Wednesday of the month, with bonus episodes for those deeper two-part dives when the story demands it. Also, quick heads up. The listener files are officially back. I'll be sharing your personal encounters as they come in, so if you've had a brush with the unexplained, send me your stories to the usual spot at contact@cryptwalkers.net. I can't wait to read them. There is also a podcast shout-out for this case. The guys at Hometown Ghost Stories, Rob Coakley, Dave, and Jesse Wilkins, investigated the location that we are covering tonight, during which they captured some awesome evidence. I will be referencing their investigation from 2014 at certain points during this case. They captured really great video evidence, and though I will be talking about what they captured, I won't be posting their footage on my feeds. Instead, I want to give credit entirely to them, and I highly, highly recommend that you check out their link in the show notes below. Follow and catch their podcast live every Tuesday night, wherever you listen to podcasts. Hey guys, sorry to pause the show, but I have a very special announcement. Well, since I closed my initial notes on this case and finished editing this episode, I reached out to the Hometown Ghost Stories podcast, and they replied back. And because of this, I am proud to share I will be turning this case into a 2-part episode in order to bring you closer to this case. Dave Wilkins, one of the hosts of Hometown Ghost Stories, and I have been talking. He's decided to hop into the studio to help me tackle the Houghton Mansion from his perspective. Catch part 2 on Wednesday, May 13th, wherever you listen to the podcast. Also, I recommend now more than ever that you check out Hometown Ghost Stories, link in the show notes on this case, before listening to part 2. Now that the housekeeping is out of the way, let's take a walk and dive deep into this case. The air feels a little thinner, and the shadows are a little bit longer as we head into the Berkshire Hills. Tonight, we are going to look at a house built for a mayor, but destined for so much more. So grab your gear, stay close. We're heading inside the Houghton Mansion. Welcome to the state of Massachusetts and the town of North Adams. Now, North Adams isn't just a town. It is a deep basin forged in the soot and heat of the American Industrial Revolution. Officially incorporated in 1878, it is a place built on high society ambitions, cold iron, and the relentless dark flow of the Hoosac River. To the world outside the Berkshire Hills, it stands as a daunting engineering marvel, the home of sprawling textile mills and the infamous Hoosac Railroad Tunnel. A 24-year-long nightmare that was so lethal, it earned the grim nickname, the Bloody Pit. But for the titans of industry who commanded this valley, it was a playground of immense wealth and power. Located at 172 Church Street, stands a mansion. Imagine a massive, bone-white neoclassical manor that looks more like a courthouse than a home. It's a boxy 3-story structure guarded by 4 towering Greek columns, creating a deep shadowed porch that feels like the mouth of a cave. It was designed with a strange architectural trick built in, where the wooden siding gets thinner as it goes up. The house feels like it's constantly leaning over you. It sits on a low stone wall made of jagged, dark rock, and its walls are perfectly symmetrical and dark, kind of like a row of eyes watching you from behind the pillars, waiting for you, tempting you to cross the threshold. This is the Houghton Mansion. Now, the Houghton Mansion was named after the Houghton family, which was led by Patriarch Albert Charles Houghton, and who played a fundamental role in the industrial and civic development of North Adams. He was born on a farm in Stamford, Vermont, and in 1844, A.C. Houghton moved to North Adams by 1868, initially running a chemical manufacturing business with his brother to supply dyes and acids to the local textile industry. By 1872, he had purchased a stake in the Arnold Print Works, and as its president, he helped build it into the largest printing and dyeing operation in the world. Because of this, he became very, very rich. Houghton believed strongly that amassing wealth and promoting education were the 2 best ways to change the world for the better. Acting on this philosophy, he heavily invested in the city's infrastructure. He helped build roads and bridges, developed the neighborhood of Houghtonville, purchased an old woolen mill to convert into a school, and donated the Blackington Mansion in 1896 to the city to serve as a library in memory of his brother, Andrew Jackson Houghton. Guys, I looked at this mansion, which still exists, and remains as the town library, and let me tell you, it's absolutely stunning. They did a really good job of not only keeping the whole environment of an old 1800s mansion, so it still looks like a house on the outside, it still looks like a house on the inside. It's just, they did a really good job of blending the library and the historical home. So it's almost like 2 attractions. So if you're ever in North Adams, you got to check it out. Also, look it up online, guys. We have this wonderful thing called the internet. You guys can check it out. Nah, I'm just kidding. I will post pictures to our socials of this particular mansion, so that way you can kind of see what I'm talking about. Okay, I'm going to dive back in. All right. Let's see, where were we? Yes. Through his business commitments, which were immense, by the way, public pressure led him to draft the city's first model charter. And in 1895, he was elected as the first mayor of North Adams. And he served 2 one-year terms. So basically, he served 2 years. Reflecting his immense wealth and social status, A.C. Houghton commissioned architect Henry Neal Wilson to build a lavish neoclassical revival mansion that would later become the Houghton Mansion on Church Street in 1897. The foundation of the mansion was built using debris from the nearby Hoosac Railroad Tunnel. Like I said, we will get back to that tunnel later. Around 1900, Houghton moved into the estate with his wife, Cordelia, and their 23-year-old daughter, Mary. The couple had 3 other daughters who survived into adulthood, including Florence and Susan, as well as a daughter named Laura, who unfortunately died in infancy. When A.C. Houghton's health began to decline around 1905, Mary resolved never to marry. That's an interesting sentence. Mary resolved never to marry so that she could dedicate her life to caring for him. At this time, A.C. cut back on his grueling work schedule, entrusting the major decisions of his business empire to his son-in-law, William A. Gallup, who was married to his daughter Florence. And by the summer of 1914, the Houghtons were the undisputed royalty of North Adams. Albert, being the city's first mayor, he was a man of immense wealth and even greater respect. He was living in a home that was simply the envy of the Berkshires. Life was an orderly parade of garden parties, business triumphs, and the quiet pride of a family simply at its peak. But the thing about peaks is that there's nowhere to go but down. In the spring of 1914, the prominent Houghton family of North Adams invested in their very first automobile. It was one of the first automobiles in the town, if not in the state. It was a 7-passenger Pierce Arrow touring car. This car was massive, and I will include it on our socials so you can see what I'm talking about. It was, think of a Model T, but the size of a bus. Okay? And it's important to point out, unlike cars today in America where the driver sits on the left-hand side and the passenger on the right, it was the exact opposite. I'll get back to that later. On Saturday, August 1st, their peak evaporated in a cloud of dust and twisted metal. What was meant to be a simple celebratory afternoon drive turned into a violent pivot point that would end the family line and begin a haunting. Like I said, when the family purchased their first vehicle, it was one of the first automobiles in the area. And really, nobody knew how to drive back then. So they tasked their longtime chauffeur, family friend, and horse caretaker, John Witters, with learning how to drive the new machine. On that tragic August morning, Albert Charles Houghton and his daughter Mary set out for a pleasure drive to Bennington, Vermont. Cordelia Houghton chose to stay home, so the father and daughter were accompanied by Mary's childhood friend, Sybil Katie Hutton, and her husband, Dr. Robert Hutton. With Witters at the wheel, they left the Houghton Mansion at 9 a.m. By 9:30 a.m., the Pierce Arrow was traveling through Pownall, Vermont, heading up what is now Oak Hill Road. The road was under repair, and a team of horses with a dump cart was parked on the right-hand side. Witters attempt to pass the vehicle on the left at a speed of about 12 miles per hour. He would later state that dust from the cart partially blinded him as he maneuvered. I would also state, coming from a law enforcement officer's perspective, that simply him sitting on the right-hand side and not the left-hand side created a visual obstruction. So he was not able to see to his left-hand side. So he could not see over the dashboard, the massive engine compartment onto the left fender on the other side. But anyway, that's just my opinion. The heavy car hit the soft left shoulder, which gave way beneath its weight. The vehicle tumbled down a steep embankment, rolling over 3 times before coming to rest upright in a farmer's field. Everyone except Mary was thrown from the vehicle. The men escaped with relatively minor injuries. They had cuts, scrapes, and bruises. But the women, they suffered a far worse fate. Sybil Houghton was killed almost instantaneously when the car rolled and crushed her. Mary Houghton sustained fatal injuries, and despite being taken to the North Adams Hospital, she succumbed to her wounds while she was being prepped for surgery later that afternoon at 3 p.m. The physical wreck was over, but the emotional devastation continued to take its toll on the survivors. A Vermont state investigator officially cleared Witters of any wrongdoing. Like I said, I would have too. But they determined that the soft shoulder caused the crash. I would also add that his visual obstruction simply by the car's build also led to the crash. However, Witters blamed himself entirely. He was consumed by grief, and he went into the basement of the Houghton barn early the following morning and shot himself in the head with a revolver. The Berkshire newspaper stated the following, quote, "Regarding the suicide of John Witters, grief-stricken over the deaths of Miss Mary Houghton and Mrs. Robert Houghton, John Witters shot himself at 4 a.m. in North Adams, following the fatal accident in North Cornwall, Vermont. Witters blamed himself and continually repeated, quote, 'I wish it was I and not the girls,' unquote. This desperation prompted the Houghton family to watch him closely. James Hines, the Houghton gardener, spent the night with Witters in the stable because Witters refused to go to sleep. At around 4 a.m., the 2 men went outside for a smoke, but Witters went back inside the barn alone for a few moments. When he failed to return, Hines called for police assistance. Officer Kavanaugh searched the Houghton barn and discovered Witters' body in the basement with a bullet through his head and a revolver lying beside him. His death was believed to have been instantaneous. John Witters, who was about 64 years old, had originally run away from his home in New Hampshire as a young boy to join a circus. He eventually came to North Adams, where he worked for a contractor in a livery stable before entering Mr. Houghton's service. Although he had just learned to drive the family's motor car earlier that season, Witters had worked for the Houghton family as a coachman for 42 years and was considered an expert horseman. Unquote. John Witters was so beloved by the family that they buried him in the Houghton plot at Southview Cemetery. Unfortunately, he died before he could hear the official ruling that he was not at fault. Although Albert Charles Houghton survived the initial crash and was brought home expecting to recover, he died just 10 days later on August 11th, 1914, while he was staying in the mansion. His internal injuries may have been worse than initially believed, and locals widely said that he just simply died of a broken heart. Now, there was an investigation, and according to his death certificate, it states that he died of a swelling of the heart, a fluid around the heart. I am not a medical person at all, but from my understanding, it's what they call a cardiac tamponade. Essentially, it can be caused by a traumatic injury, such as a hard hit to the chest. Essentially, the sac that the heart is in, there's like this sac that surrounds it, and there's a film of fluid in between the heart muscle and this sac, and it basically serves as almost like a lubricant. Well, if you fill that up with fluid, the heart cannot pump, therefore no heartbeat equals death. Anyway, following the death of Albert, Cordelia Houghton inherited the property. To care for her widowed mother, Albert's daughter Florence and her husband William A. Gallup moved back into the mansion. Historical sources provided slightly conflicting timelines regarding the family's final years in the estate. One account states that Florence and William made the mansion their home and cared for Cordelia until her death in 1916. The couple reportedly continued to reside there until William retired in 1926, at which point Florence and another surviving sister, Susan Houghton McKeon, sold the property to the Freemasons. And another account suggests that Cordelia lived in the home until she passed away in 1918. According to this version of events, Florence inherited the mansion but was already living in the Boston area, prompting her to sell the family home to the local Masonic lodge in 1927. Slight differences. At the end of the day, I don't know if it really matters. When they sold the property, the mansion transitioned from a family residence to a sanctuary for the Freemasons, specifically the Lafayette Greylock Lodge. To understand the Masons, you have got to look past the Hollywood conspiracies and see them for what they are. One of the world's oldest fraternal organizations, built on the traditions of medieval stonemasons and dedicated to the philosophy of making good men better. For nearly a century, the Masons have served as the meticulous caretakers of this property, conducting their private rituals and charitable works behind the neoclassical walls. But as the Masonic brothers moved through these hallways in their ceremonial aprons, they began to realize that they weren't the only ones inhabiting the space. It's through these quiet, documented accounts from these men of logic and tradition, that many of the most credible reports of the Houghton hauntings first came to light. The Masons quickly began altering the estate to suit the needs of their secret brotherhood. They did away with the beautiful formal rear garden where the Houghtons had once hosted elegant parties to raise money for charities, and constructed a large attached lodge building in its place to hold their private meetings and rituals. Over the ensuing decades, practical economy drove further changes to the building's exterior. The Masons removed the extravagant Spanish tile roof and replaced it with a simple asphalt roof, and eventually covered the mansion's original clapboards, I can't say that word, original siding with modern plastic crappy siding that you just get at Lowe's. Just saying. Inside, the mansion took on a more mysterious atmosphere. Deep in the dark, dusty basement, the Masons kept a rusting barber's chair that was used in an old, trust me, long discontinued initiation ritual where initiates were to be strapped in and administered electric shocks. That doesn't sound fun. This is coming from a guy who was tased in a training exercise. Not fun. Anyway, honestly, that's almost like an initiation anyway, but I digress. This coming from a visitor of the mansion. This report is coming from a visitor of the mansion, Irene Lowenson, who was a writer for the Williams records, told to her by the tour guide on her trip in 2016. So if that whole paragraph sounded confusing, as it just confused me, I will reiterate. Irene Lowenson from the Williams records visited the mansion in 2016. Her tour guide is the one that told her about the barber chair and the shocky time. Anyway, you guys have to forgive me. I just came off shift. I am tired, and I'm trying to read my notes. I'm trying to read my deep dive, and I think I'm seeing 2 paragraphs at once. But anyway, I'll continue along. I'm just going to leave this in here at this random rambling, because this is what happens when you host a podcast by yourself. I'm just saying. Okay, according to the city's records, there was a building that had been raised before the mansion was built in its place. However, they did not remove all of the basement. I mean, why waste a good basement? So part of the basement is believed to be much, much older than the mansion itself. The Masons soon discovered that their newly acquired temple came with some uninvited guests. Throughout the decades of ownership, lodge members repeatedly reported unexplainable phenomena. Masons working in the building heard mysterious knocking on the walls, a woman's voice echoing in the rooms, and a phantom footstep pacing the empty corridors. One Mason, who was exploring the second-floor records room with his wife, was terrified when the sound of invisible rustling papers grew so loud that the couple fled the building. Another veteran lodge member was converted from a skeptic to a believer on a snowy night when he heard the side door open and shut, followed by heavy stomping of boots, only to investigate and find empty halls and a completely undisturbed snow outside. One other key note that he observed was that he saw snowy footprints coming from the door, going about 4 or 5 paces into the hallway, and then it just ended. Almost as if the walker who was walking into the building just vanished. Despite the Masons' physical transformation of the property, local lore insists that the spirits of Albert, Mary, and Witters have never left. The Masons ultimately embraced this haunted reputation, opening their doors to ghost tours and paranormal television crews, such as Ghost Hunters and Ghost Adventures, to help fund the expensive upkeep of the massive building. However, all reports suggest that the Masons were very legitimate and they were not charging outrageous prices to investigate the building, nor were they trying to amp up the haunting. Plenty of investigators could attest to that over the years. They were not in it for the money, unlike some locations which I will not mention on this podcast. According to Ron Kolek, lead investigator of the New England Ghost Project, one of the Masons told him a story in which a burly telemarketer ran from the mansion late one night and refused to return. However, the Mason never did catch the man's complete story, so to this day, no one knows exactly what scared him so much. Mark Schmidt explains in an internet article called The Haunted History of the Houghton Mansion. Schmidt writes and states, quote, Mary Houghton's room is a paranormal hotspot, where one Mason says that they had previously caught EVPs of ghostly screams, as well as the command of, "Get out!" Similar EVPs have been captured on the 3rd floor of the mansion as well. On the 3rd floor, where the butlers and maids lived, a full-bodied apparition was seen standing at a doorway at 11 p.m. People who visit that floor have left crying because of the dark energy that they have found there. A photograph of the mansion shows a ghostly face staring out the 3rd floor window. Many have seen this apparition while walking by the house. Interestingly enough, the lights in this 3rd floor room don't work because the electrical fixtures in the rooms are simply dead. Still, people living in homes nearby report that they have seen the lights on in this room at night. One of the many reasons the Houghton Mansion is one of the 5 most haunted locations in Massachusetts. Unquote. During ghost tours, flashlights have been observed turning on and off in responses to yes or no questions. There have also been occurrences in which a flashlight would suddenly move across the floor on its own. Now, as a paranormal investigator myself, I am kind of skeptical when it comes to the whole flashlight observation thing. In the past, it has been believed that if you take a small mag light, almost like one of those little small police lights, and you turn the actual lens just barely to where it's just about to turn on the light, and if you lay it down, it's believed that you can have the ghost or the spirit answer you with yes or no questions. If it's a yes, you turn the light on, turn it off. If it's a no, turn it on and off 2 times, right? And that's fine. But here's the problem with that. So it is believed that because you have turned this basically electric connection just to where it's barely about to connect, that it might be possible for the voltage to jump the current across that gap and thereby turning on the light. Now, is it because simply the device is heating up and then you have the contraction, with the light that heats up and then it cools and back and forth and blah, blah, blah. At some point, I'm not going to mention it right now. I'm not going to go into details with it right now, but there is going to be a Crypt Walkers mini-series sometime in the future where I might go into detail on different investigating types and different techniques, including some of the pros and cons of doing certain experiments, like with the flashlight test, as we like to call it. But one thing that I will point out, it is interesting if that happens at the same time that you record something else, such as, let's say, on night vision camera, you see an orb go and hit the light and then it turns on. Or you see, a millimeter spike at the same time that you see the flashlight turn on. Something that correlates with it. Now, that is interesting. Also, if you have a flashlight that is just sitting on the table, nice, it's been sitting there this whole time, 5 minutes that you've been talking, blah, blah, blah. You guys are going back and forth, and then all of a sudden, this flashlight suddenly takes off across the room, rolling across the floor, and nobody touched it. Okay, I would say that is something of merit. But anyway, I'm sorry, I went off on this tangent. I'll go ahead and get back into it. There have also been many reports of a door which has been known to close on command. The general belief is that Albert is the one who closes the door, because it is only when you ask for him to do it specifically will he actually do it. On an investigation captured by Hometown Ghost Stories, 2 investigators witnessed the door closing on command and even on cue. Guys, in the show notes, there is a link to the specific video. It's like I say it's a long form version of their video. It's not really long form. It's not a long video. It's just basic, real time, as it happened, the way it happened. And it's pretty compelling. So essentially what you have is you have the 2 investigators, they're recording. And I mean, this is not Ghost Adventures, night vision style. This is just with the lights on and everything. It's not spooky by any means. It's just they're looking at these doors, which are French doors. It leads from the first floor to the second floor, and there's like a stairwell on the other end, just behind it. And so you can see what's on the other side. And the door is just open. It doesn't have an automatic closing, actuating mechanism thingy. It's just sitting there. And they're asking it to close. At one point, if I'm remembering this correctly, they asked A.C. Houghton if he could close the door. And literally, as they asked that, the door doesn't just slightly close, like the wind is slowly blowing it. No, it closes. As if somebody grabbed it and purposely and intentionally and knowingly closed it. At another point, they reopen the door and they ask, I need you to close the door, something to the effect of, I need you to close the door in 3, 2, 1. And the door closes at the exact moment that they end the countdown. I think it's very compelling. Also, their reactions, because some people might say, oh, well, they tied a fishing line to it or something, and I can understand that. But I've also been around enough people to where I can kind of judge on whether or not somebody is absolutely faking something. And the reaction that I saw in the video was pretty compelling. It was actual shock. Imagine seeing that as an investigator. Also, you can see through to the other side. Through the, I know that sounded very spiritual. You can see to the other side. Anyway, you could see through the French doors to the other side. So there was no one on the other side of the door. Also, The investigator who was standing in frame wasn't anywhere near the door, and you can see his hands at all times, so it's not like he's pulling on a string. And I'll tell you right now, as heavy as that door looks, even if it was a fishing line, okay, it'd have to be a pretty good one. Okay, this is not just a little tiny, moving a piece of paper across the table with a fishing line. This is an actual big, heavy door. I just found it very compelling, and I encourage you guys to go watch the video for yourself and let us know what you think. Okay? I'll go ahead and get back into it. Where was I? I kind of went off tangent. Yes. So, the basement is also a hot spot. I mean, duh. All basements are, but this one is special, trust me. Visitors report a very eerie feeling, and when Irene Lowenson visited, like I said before, she stated that she couldn't be down there for long because this was like an unbearable weight about it. The foundation is also visible in the basement, which therefore means the rock walls are, which once occupied the Hoosac Tunnel. They're also in plain view. So why is this important? Well, remember when I said I'll get back to the Hoosac Tunnel earlier? Well, here is a brief background on a place that will honestly probably be a case one day all on its own. The Hoosac Tunnel is an active 4.7-mile long railroad tunnel in western Massachusetts that passes directly through the hard rock of the Hoosac mountain range. Its west portal is located in North Adams, and its east portal opens into the town of Florida along the Deerfield River. Today, it serves as a critical freight corridor for Pan Am Southern Route, which is jointly operated by Norfolk Southern and the Berkshire and Eastern Railroad. The tunnel was originally conceived in the mid-19th century to provide a direct low-grade rail connection from eastern Massachusetts to the commercial markets in Albany, New York. Construction officially began in 1851, but the project was plagued by several financial issues, political roadblocks, the Civil War, and the sheer difficulty of carving a 24-foot wide by 20-foot high opening through exceptionally hard gneiss and quartz rock. After more than 2 decades of labor, the tunnel finally opened on February 9th, 1875, at an estimated cost of $20 million. At the time of its completion, it was the longest tunnel in North America and the second longest in the world. The tunneling process was incredibly dangerous. It claimed the lives of nearly 200 workers, earning the tunnel the grim nickname, the Bloody Pit. The most devastating single accident occurred on October 17th, 1867. At the tunnel's nearly 1,000-foot deep central shaft, an accidental fire ignited flammable materials and explosives in the building directly above the shaft, destroying the hoisting machinery and causing flaming debris, steel tools, and heavy timber to rain down on the 13 men trapped below. With the pumps destroyed, the shaft rapidly filled with groundwater and smoke. It took nearly a year to clear the wreckage and recover the bodies, at which point rescuers realized that the men had survived the initial collapse by building a crude raft before ultimately dying of suffocation. I'm going to include an engineering map. It's kind of like a what do they call it, where you slice it in the view on the side. Yeah, so it's like a side view of the tunnel. It shows where this central shaft is, okay? So you can kind of get an idea of it. It'll be included on our Facebook page and anywhere else that we include our additional content. So, back to the thing. The low retaining wall that circles the mansion and sections of the mansion's foundation were built using the rubble excavated from the tunnel's construction. Now, this isn't just any stone, it's mica slate and quartz that was blasted from the heart of the mountain during what was that 24-year-long nightmare. Literally speaking, the mansion is anchored by debris from a massive 4.7-mile-long wound in the earth. The Hoosac Tunnel is perhaps one of the most haunted transportation sites in the world, famous for headless apparitions and muffled voices that still echo through its active freight line even today. There are engineers who have not publicly stated, but at least on, one-to-one terms with others and rumors, have stated that it really freaks them out to go into these tunnels. Because imagine, this tunnel is 4.7 miles long. That's a long time of being in pitch darkness with nothing around you. Anyway, I digress. The Hoosac Tunnel is, in my opinion, worthy of its own case. Trust me. By bringing that rock onto the Houghton property, it's kind of like the family unknowingly installed a massive geological battery, one charged with the grief and terror of the bloody pit, just years before their own family tragedy would strike. Stone tape theory, anyone? For those of you who are not familiar with the stone tape theory, let me tell you. Essentially, stone tape theory suggests that minerals and rocks can record high-energy events, kind of like a tragic death or a moment of extreme terror, and play them back later under the right conditions. Instead of a conscious ghost interacting with the living, the haunting is more like a geological DVR. And let me restate that. Instead of a conscious spirit interacting with the living, the haunting is simply a ghost-like playthrough of what occurred, almost like a geological DVR. The environment itself has absorbed a memory into its atomic structure, usually in materials like quartz, limestone, and even iron ore. Also, devices and objects can also be included into the theory as well. Interesting side note for this case. It's not really related to the topic at hand, but I was going through some research. I've never heard anybody really talk about this before, and I thought, hey, it'd be kind of cool to add it, and plus my ADHD found it interesting. The story of the mysterious phonograph cylinder. Cylinder? My goodness. Cylinder. This is the story of the mysterious phonograph cylinder, and this is said to have contained A.C. Houghton's last words. This story originates from a student's discovery at the Freel Library on the Massachusetts College of Liberal Arts MCLA campus. Sometime in the early 2000s, while exploring the library's third-floor local history section, the student found a locked box containing dusty tinfoil-like cylinders. Curiously, the librarian noted that this specific cylinder was completely unmarked. It lacked any identifying tags and was not listed anywhere in the library's official records. With the librarian's help, the student played the cylinder on an antique phonographic machine located in the library's basement. Because I guess every library has that device in their basement. The recording eerily begins with a man stating, quote, "I am Albert Charles Houghton," unquote, before proceeding to deliver a short summary of his life that functions as a first-person obituary. The most chilling aspect of the recording is that the speaker mentions the specific date of the tragic 1914 automobile accident. While the student who found it initially believed the recording also included Houghton's exact date of death, other listeners noted that it only states the date that the crash occurred. Now, because Houghton survived for 10 days after the accident before passing away, several theories have emerged online to explain the origin of the recording. 1. A final message. Since medical science was limited in 1914, some speculate that Houghton knew that his injuries were fatal, and he used a cylinder recorder to get his affairs in order and leave a final message for posterity while he waited to die. 2. An after-death memorial. Others theorize that the recording is not actually Houghton's voice, but rather someone speaking for him. It may have been recorded later by an actor or a friend for a local museum exhibit, a public memorial, or his funeral. After all, Houghton was a kind of town anchor type person. He was known in the town. Anyway, 3. Spiritualism. Another theory points to the high popularity of the spiritualistic movement at the time, suggesting that the recording could have been created by a medium or charlatan connected to a seance, attempting to contact Houghton or his daughter after their deaths. I would argue that this is not an EVP. Just saying. What is very interesting is an audiovisual archivist who learned of the story pointed out that allowing a patron to play a fragile, century-old cylinder on a vintage needle phonograph is terrible archival practice, as it can easily destroy the one-of-a-kind artifact before it can be safely digitized and preserved. Now, the Reddit post where I discovered this did include a link with the audio file, and the comments in the forum did indicate that the recording did work at one time. However, this post is so old, and when the link is clicked, it takes the consumer to an error page. Unfortunate, because I was unable to find this track anywhere else. So, guys, it is a Reddit post, so take that as you will. But, like I said, my ADHD brain just found it interesting, and I just had to share it with you. Okay? So, don't kick a man when he's down. Anyway, after the Masons. The Greylock Freemasons continued to share the space with their spectral roommates until 2017, when the high costs of maintenance forced them to sell the property to a hotel developer for $160,000. Since then, the building has been essentially abandoned and has not been occupied at all. Interestingly enough, though, some locals have reported still seeing lights coming on and off at night in Witter's old bedroom. Remember, that one that's on the 3rd floor? Despite the power not being active. According to the internet, the man who bought it is a hotel developer, and rumor has it that he intends to develop it into a hotel. However, there have been some signs of minor exterior restorations, such as new paint, but for almost a decade, there really hasn't been much else. I personally hope that they allow paranormal investigators to return in the future, but we'll see. I will continue to monitor the situation. If anything changes, I'll definitely update you guys on our socials, or also through perhaps a update episode regarding the mansion. Who knows? So, to conclude, the Houghton Mansion stands today as more than just a piece of North Adams history, or a meeting place for the Freemasons. It is a monument to a legacy that was cut short in a single dusty afternoon in 1914. Whether it's the restless spirit of John Witter's looking for a forgiveness that he just couldn't find in life, or the literal echoes of tragedy trapped within the stones of the Hoosac Tunnel, the mansion reminds us that the past is never truly buried or gone. Sometimes it's built right into the foundation. Next time, when you walk past an old, silent home or building, ask yourself, is it the silence because nobody is there, or because something is waiting for the right moment to play back? Well, the investigation doesn't end here, guys. Please support the show by following us and leaving a review. It's how we keep the lights on here in the studio. Your reviews are the lifeblood of this show, as they help others find us. If you know someone who doesn't mind the dark, tell them about the show. Stay tuned for a briefing on our next case. I am your host, Ryder, and thank you for walking the crypts with me tonight. Case closed for now.
Next time on Crypt Walkers.
The Houghton Mansion has turned out to be more than an interesting case. It is one that is perfect for a ghost story. And together, you and I have explored the history, traced the tragedy, and got to know the family that befell it. And normally, that's all that is needed for a case episode. But while diving deep into this case, I came across some pretty compelling evidence of the paranormal. Realizing this, I knew I had to talk with someone who was actually there when it happened and has experienced the mansion for himself.
There was no light switch moment, but it was sort of gradual over time, and it starts with that door at the Houghton Mansion, oddly enough, because my job was to go there and debunk it, and I couldn't debunk the door, and it was like if you walked...
Join me and Dave Wilkins of Hometown Ghost Stories as we cross-examine the legends, Masonic secrets, and the spirits that refuse to leave this manor. Part 2 of the Houghton Mansion investigation drops Wednesday, May 13th, wherever you get your podcasts.